Today we're going to learn how to factor trinomials with the leading coefficient greater than 1 using the AC method. Right here the leading coefficient is a, so the coefficient that's in front of x squared. So right here we have 2 that's greater than 1, 7 is greater than 1, and 6 is greater than 1. So let's look at the steps. So the steps for using the AC method is multiply a times c. That's why it's called the AC method. Then we're going to identify factors of AC that add up to the middle term, b. Then we're going to use those factors and substitute bx. So we're going to remove the negative 21 for example number 1. And we're going to replace it with those two factors. And then we're going to factor by grouping. Alright, so let's see how that's done on problem number 1. So step 1 is multiply a times c. So I'm going to take the 2 and then I'm going to multiply by negative 11 and I get negative 22. Okay, so then we're going to identify the factors of AC that add up to b. So let's write down negative 22. And so what are some factors of negative 22? Well, since it's a negative, we're going to need a positive and a negative number. The negative number is going to have to be the largest because b is a large negative number. So we're going to start with a positive 1 and a negative 22. And so positive 1 plus negative 22 adds up to, so let me move this here for a second. So that adds up to negative 21. So that is what we're going to be using, positive 1 and negative 22. So now for step number 3, it says substitute bx with factors of AC. So we're going to bring down 2x squared. We're going to substitute negative 21x with positive 1x and negative 22x. And we're going to bring down the negative 11. Okay, let's put some space there. So now on the last step, it says factor by grouping. So now we're going to do that. So I'm going to group this into the first two terms and the second two terms. I see for the first two terms we have an x in common. So that's the greatest common factor. So we get left with 2x plus 1. And now for the second two terms, it looks like we have a negative 11 in common between the negative 22x and the minus 11. So I'm going to bring out a negative 11. So that leaves me with 2x plus 1 inside of the parentheses. Now we're going to bring out this 2x plus 1 out because both of these have 2x plus 1 in common. So I'm going to write 2x plus 1 parentheses x minus 11. Alright, so now let's check to make sure that that is correct. So check. Alright, so we're going to FOIL. So 2x times x, that's 2x squared. And remember that factoring is the reverse of multiplication. So how I'm checking it is I'm taking this and I'm multiplying it out to see if I end up with what I started with. And if that turns out to be the case, then we're good. So back to foiling. So 2x times x is x squared. 2x times negative 11 is negative 22x. Positive 1 times x, that's plus x. And positive 1 times negative 11, that's going to be negative 11. Then we combine the two middle terms, and we end up with 2x squared minus 21x minus 11. And that turns out to be what we started off with, so check. Okay, so now let's look at the second problem. So right here we have 7a squared plus 12ab plus 5b squared. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is multiplying that a times the c. So our a is 7 and our c is 5. So let's do that. So 7 times 5 is equal to a positive 35. So we're looking for factors of 35 that add up to that middle term. And right here, it just turns out to be 5 and 7. Positive 5 and positive 7 because they need to add up to positive 12. So now, for the third step, substitute bx with factors of ac. So I'm going to bring down the 7a squared. That bx is our middle term here. You can think about the ab as being the x. This just looks a little different here. So 7a squared plus 5ab plus 7ab and then plus 5b squared. Let's move things a little bit down so that we have space for our 5b squared. 5b squared. Okay, so now we're going to factor by grouping. What do those first two terms have in common? It looks like they have an a in common, so we bring an a out. So 7a plus 5b. Now the second two terms have a b in common, so it's a positive b that we bring out. And then we get left with 7a plus 5b. And now these two terms have 7a plus 5b in common. So I'm going to bring that 7a plus 5b outside. So we got 7a plus 5b. And what gets left inside is the a plus b. All right. So we check by foiling it out and seeing if we end up with what we started with. So check step. So 7a times a, that's 7a squared. 7a times b, that's positive 7ab. 5b times a is positive 5ab. And I'm just putting it in alphabetical order. And positive 5b times positive b is positive 5b squared. And we add those two middle terms, we end up with 7a squared plus 12ab plus 5b squared. That checks out with what we started off with, so this is correct. This has been factored correctly using the AC method. Now let's look at this last problem here. So right here, our A value is 6. Our C value is 21. 6 times 21 is going to be 126. So I'm going to look for factors of 126 that add up to negative 23. So now this is a positive 126. So we can only have either two positives or two negatives. And both of those have to add up to give you a negative number. So I cannot have two positive numbers. It has to be two negative numbers. So that's what I'm going to be trying out, two negative numbers. So let me erase this here. So let's start off with 2. So negative 2 times negative 63. That does not add up to give you negative 23. Then we move on to negative 3 times negative 42. That does not add up to give you negative 23. That's negative 45. Let's try out negative 6 times negative 21. That gives you negative 27. So we need to keep going. Negative 7 times negative 18. That's not it either. That adds up to give you negative 24. So we keep going. So negative 9 times negative 14. So that turns out to be negative 23. So this adds up to give you negative 23. Okay, so those are my factors. That was a little longer of a list, but we got there. So 6x squared, we bring down the first term. Then we replace that bx term, so that's step 3, with negative 9x and negative 14x. And then we bring down the 21 plus 21. So again, we're going to group this into 2, and we're going to look for factors the greatest common factor of the first two terms and the greatest common factor of the second two terms. So it looks like for the first one I can take out a 3x, and what gets left inside is a 2x and a negative 3. So, and you can always check by multiplying 3x times 2x, that gives you 6x squared, and then 3x times negative 3, that gives you negative 9x. Alright, so from the second two terms, I'm going to pull out a negative 7, and that gives me 2x minus 3. Okay, so now it looks like both of them have a 2x minus 3 in common. So I'm going to bring that out. So let's see. We have 2x minus 3. So we pulled that out, and we get left inside with 3x minus 7. Okay, so now let's check to make sure that that is correct. So check. Alright, so I'm going to FOIL those two binomials. So 2x times 3x, that's going to be 6x squared. 2x times negative 7, that's going to be negative 14x. Negative 3 times 3x, that's going to be negative 9x. And negative 3 times negative 7, that's positive 21. And I combine those two terms in the middle, and that we end up with 6, 7, 8, 9. Negative 23x plus 21 and 6x squared. That's what we started off with, so that checks out, and I factored this correctly.